Welcome to another interesting edition of Tech Trends, your number one tech show on television. Our tech tip segment today advises you on how to guard against ransomware. Our mobile app of the week is Price Info app. And finally, we have a cool gift for you on our giveaway segment. This is Tech Trends, and I am Chukwemeka Agbata.
A new model of smart robots designed by an American manufacturer, Rethink Robotics. The uniqueness is embodied in its compliant motion control, which allows it to feel its way into fixtures or machines. The user only needs to pull his arm to the demanded position, guide it hand by hand to go through the task, and then the robot will remember all the moves and be able to fulfill the task on its own. Compared with conventional industrial robots, Sawyer provides a better user experience and it's highly intelligent with only a few buttons on its body. Moreover, it can be operated safely next to human co-workers. It's not hazardous even if a worker accidentally bumps into the robot. Many large enterprises in the US, including General Electric and Steelcase, have introduced Sawyer into their assembly lines.
Sawyer is a unique robot in that it has facial expressions. It has eyes, and they communicate to you when it's doing work. He doesn't have a mouth, so he won't talk back. And because it's a collaborative robot, it can work, and it will work 8 hours a day, 3 shifts, every single day of the week, and he won't change his job unless you tell him to.
As of this spring, there were more than 260,000 collaborative robots put into use in American factories, according to the Robotic Industrial Association of the US. In 2015, the value of robot sales orders by North American companies totaled $1.8 billion, with 31,000 robots sold, 14% up year-on-year. The founder of Rethink, Rodney Brooks, said intelligent robots would replace human beings first in the field of repetitive tasks, such as operations on assembly lines. Then, as the techniques of intelligent vehicles are developing rapidly, robots would eventually take driving as an occupation as well.
High-end cars, and it'll trickle down to cheaper cars, are letting the elderly maintain their independence longer because they can continue to drive. In the US, if you can't drive, you lose your independence. It's happening in Europe, it's happening in the US, and it will happen in China too over the next 30 years. So I think all those large economies are going to have a problem with lots of elderly people and not so many younger people to provide them services. So I'm interested in how the world can develop robots to help let the elderly have independence and dignity longer.
He maintained that a common challenge to the robot industry worldwide is to develop robots that can deal with the global issue of aging while they are affordable. A trained microbiologist, Robbins, will be using gene samples to put Oxford Nanospore's Minion sequencer, a pocket-sized DNA sequencer, through its steps. The tests are intended to prove whether the technology can be used to understand microbes in the space station, to scan fellow astronauts for genetic changes that could diagnose illness, and in future missions, potentially test samples from Mars and elsewhere for signs of DNA-based life. One of the first things the scientists need to prove is just how well the machine operates in microgravity.
So we're going to start out with the samples that are flying up with the analyzer, and we're just going to take a look at this piece of equipment. It's really technology development to understand how this is working in the microgravity environment. Technology behaves differently up here. Fluids behave differently up here. Bubbles form in fluids, and so it's going to be a really interesting piece of equipment just to check out and to understand.
The Minion sequencer, which is about half the size of a smartphone, operates fundamentally differently from current DNA sequencers, according to NASA. With most sequencers, scientists put in a sample and it runs for 24 to 48 hours and then stops. The station sequencer displays its analysis as it works. The Minion DNA sequencer is among the nearly 4,900 pounds of cargo scheduled to be launched to the station aboard a SpaceX Dragon capsule. It will be the first use of the machine in space, according to NASA. Currently, samples from space must be frozen and flown back to Earth for analysis.
The ground teams have come up with an incredibly well thought out first set of experiments, and what we're going to do is sequence the genome of a virus, lambdaphage, which is not a pathogenic virus, it's a standard one used in the lab. We're going to sequence a bacteria, again, not harmful, just one that we standardly use in the lab, and we're going to sequence mouse genome. And those are all three mixed together so that we can determine how the sequencer works on these different organisms.
If all checks out, the DNA sequencer could be used to help diagnose illness in astronauts on the space station and understand whether any disease-causing microbes are susceptible to antibiotics, helping to conserve valuable medications that cannot be readily restocked. The device joins a suite of older diagnostic instruments aboard the station.
We do have a lot of controls up here. Anything that we bring up to the space station has to be checked for safety because we're living in a closed-loop environment. So we're very careful to maintain all of those safety controls so we don't harm the occupants of the space station. But because it is a closed-loop environment, that also provides some of the really interesting scientific questions that we want to answer. We recycle our air, we recycle our water, and we've been doing that constantly as long as we've had human presence on board the space station. So we balance the safety concerns, and then we've also got a fantastic research environment to really learn some completely novel things about how human beings behave in a closed-loop environment.
Testing the DNA sequencer in space also could pave way for its use in remote or resource-poor areas on Earth.
Well, right now we take samples and then we send them down on SpaceX, which actually has the ability to send down cold and frozen samples, and scientists can later analyze that. But we have a little bit of a lag, so we don't actually get to look at what's going on, and we don't get to analyze everything that's happening to human beings or to cells really in real time. These kinds of small portable genomic technologies are going to let us look in real time what's actually happening to bone degradation, for example, what's happening to your immune system, what's happening to a population of microbes that you bring up in a culture flask.
Authorities at a Florida zoo and a Pennsylvania cemetery have walked in Pokemon Go enthusiasts to play by the rules of the real world. Still, players follow their phones along paths at the Naples Zoo, walking by animals to catch a Pokemon.
We saw how many Pokemon stops were here, so that was a bonus.
The zoo has posted signs asking visitors not to venture outside public areas of the zoo where they could encounter dangerous animals. Zoo official Scott Johnson said breaking that rule will come with consequences.
It's going to end up not being a whole lot of fun. Even if they don't get injured by an animal, if they're found by zoo employees, most likely they're probably going to be escorted out of the zoo.
Zoo officials also contacted game developers to request that Pokemon stops be kept within the zoo's public area. In Pennsylvania, police said about 40 Pokemon Go players led inside the cemetery by the popular video game were locked behind its gates after the cemetery closed. Yet, even in a driving rainstorm, players walked through the cemetery in Dunmore and found shelter in their vehicles, hunting for Pokemon characters.